source of stress in my life, and it is now blue. Click. And we're live. It is Monday, December 14th, 2020, 5:02 p.m. And I want to tell you about something that I just tweeted about that I had an idea for. I have been working for the last couple days on an article about the Michael Flynn pardon and trying to think about whether there's anything good that could come of the Mike Flynn pardon. And the answer is no, by the way. It's just a terrible thing for reasons I will explain in the article. It is also almost certainly a harbinger of things to come as we wind down the 37 remaining days in the Trump presidency. However, I thought to myself, what if Joe Biden looked at this story and said, I want to create a silver lining out of it. The Justice Department is lying about Mike Flynn, as Judge Emmett Sullivan made clear in his opinion dismissing the case. They're misstating the law. They're pretending that he was in fact innocent. But hey, there's a germ of a good idea here. And the germ of the good idea is that every federal prosecutor has a case that they regret. Every federal judge, every sentencing judge in the country has a case that they regret the sentence that they had to impose because of either the sentencing guidelines back when they were mandatory or the mandatory minimums. So what if I invited every former federal prosecutor, current federal prosecutor, every federal judge who's ever sentenced somebody to submit to the United States Pardon Attorney the cases they regret so that I can review them for clemency? What if the president said, hey, I'm not looking to let a whole lot of criminals out of prison, but if you're a federal judge and you regret something that you had to do as a federal judge, let the Justice Department know. And I will consider that. And that was my thought for the day. And I thought if Biden could do for real what Bill Barr pretends to have done on the Mike Flynn matter, that would be super cool. So we're not allowed to have fun anymore. But in lieu of fun, we are allowed to have on the show Asha Rangappa. And Asha has, I hope you will not take offense when I say this, Asha, one of the genuinely strangest careers in the law that I know of. And so I want to ask you, I want to start with that. How do you go from being a Yale Law student to being an FBI agent to being a Yale Law admissions person for a long time to running the Jackson Center at Yale? I just want to understand the connective tissue behind one of the oddest career paths. Like, I have another one of the oddest career paths around, but yours is weird. So tell us about how it happened.
Can I just point out one thing, which is that it's not just that it's odd, it's also kind of like awesome. Like every single thing that you did, just like you, Ben, kind of like, you kind of are like, wow, that's like the pinnacle of that thing to do. And that's a really great other thing. And so it's like, how do you rocket to the top of all of these seemingly unconnected types of career things?
I just, for those of you who don't know, joining the FBI is not the normal thing to do out of Yale Law School. I mean,
no.
Are there any others who've done it in the years that you know of?
No, there's actually no other Yale Law grad that joined the FBI that I know of. The alumni office told me, and I met this person, I think he has since passed away. One man who graduated from the law school sometime in the 60s. He spent, I think, 3 or 4 years in the FBI. He later became a Connecticut Supreme Court justice. And
so that's your future.
I would meet him, you know, at the former Special Agent Society Christmas party every year. And one year he mentioned that he had gone to Yale Law School. I didn't even know this. And he is the only other person that I know of. And I think more generally, the law is a very conformist profession. It's really hard to get off the beaten path generally.
But okay, your career up through your clerkship looks really normal, right? You went to a good college, you turn around and you go to the Yale Law School, you clerk for a federal judge. So far you are right on the beaten path. And then you're like, all right, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to become an FBI special agent, which is just not on the beaten path. And I just want to know how that happened.
Yeah, and I think that maybe some of the choices I made before that might be more indicative of going down the FBI path. So, I mean, I grew up the child of Indian immigrants in Southern Virginia. So that's kind of like, you know, already starting. Most, you know, South Asian children don't end up in law enforcement, or even doing, you know, law school admissions or whatever. So I think there was always just a rebellious streak of kind of wanting to do the thing that, like, you know, I wasn't supposed to do or I wasn't expected to do. After college, I did a Fulbright fellowship, and I went to Bogota, Colombia. This was in the late 90s. And so, you know, while everybody else was going off to Europe or, you know, kind of nice countries, you know, I decided to go to Bogota. And actually, my grandfather at the time told my father that he should disown me if I go to Bogota because it was too dangerous and a woman shouldn't be there on her own. And my dad was like, yeah, I don't think she's going to not go. So there was that off the beaten path. Then the clerkship, I also went to San Juan, Puerto Rico. And as far as I know, I was the only person to apply for a clerkship in Puerto Rico.
That clerkship is semi-famous. Like, people are like,
it's the best clerk.
Yeah,
totally
exactly.
The best clerkship in the country.
Yeah, like, people are like, yes, I'll go to Puerto Rico to clerk for a fancy federal judge. Like,
although I want to say the only other person I know who's clerked in Puerto Rico was viciously sexually harassed the entire time. So it is not but that wasn't that clerkship. It was a different clerkship.
Okay, good. I was like, God, Ben, that was like that was really like, it was like a call above the law. They just have like a scoop or something.
Well, the judge in question was eventually forced to resign from the bench for sexual harassment.
Wow, well, there you go.
I'm not going to name the individual in question, but let's just say that my friend's experience was by no means atypical.
Okay. But yeah, so you were clerking so you did all these clerkships. So, like, I love these stories. This is what I've yet to find like a very satisfying answer, but maybe you'll be the one. Every FBI person or CIA person we've had on, I'm always like, how did you exactly get recruited or join? Like, I don't know at all how to even, like, I would not know how to begin a career in the FBI or the CIA.
Yeah, so you're clerking in Puerto Rico, and you're like, I have an idea. I want to do FBI agent training.
No, so that actually came before. So it was in my third year of law school. I had just spent my first summer in law school, I clerked at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Baltimore because I wanted to be a federal prosecutor. That was sort of what I thought I was going to do coming out of law school. And then my second summer, I worked at 2 law firms. I worked at one law firm in Miami and one in Dallas. And after working for those law firms, which were very nice law firms, they treated me very well, I realized that one does not walk out of law school, even Yale Law School, and just waltz into a U.S. Attorney's office. That typically you work for a law firm for several years before you can then apply to a U.S. Attorney's office. And I realized that if I worked for a law firm, I would fling myself out a window. So I kind of had this, existential crisis in my third year of law school of what do I do? Like, I have this path. I want to go to a U.S. attorney's office. I cannot go work for a law firm. It just like crushes my soul to do this. And so I had this like crazy idea because I had met FBI agents when I had been at Baltimore at the U.S. attorney's office. We had, obviously I met them for the cases that I was working on. We actually took a tour of the FBI Academy that summer. And during that tour, I remember the tour guide said that under Hoover, lawyers were always, FBI agents were always lawyers or accountants. And like, it was just like this kind of like little light bulb went off because I had never associated those two things. It had never occurred to me that lawyers became FBI agents. And of course it made sense because they did complex financial investigations. So, of course, this would have been the two professions that they would have drawn from. So that had been marinating in my head for a little while. And so in my third year, I don't know. I thought, well, why don't I do a workaround? I'll apply to the FBI. I will kick down doors for 5 years or whatever. And then I'll apply to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And this will be like doing law and order, but I'll do the order first and then I'll do the law. So
I love every part of your brain. Like, I also had if I work for a law firm, I will have to scrape myself out of bed every morning and hate my life, and I'm going to be so miserable. And then I also have been like, that kind of law and order mentality is exactly the same type of law and order mentality. I'd be like, I'm still on the track. I
totally thought I was still on the track. Like, for me, this was just a workaround, and I was very fortunate that Yale Law School had a very generous loan forgiveness program.
Right.
That if you go to
It's
a
amazing.
low-paying job, they will pay back your loans while you do that. So, to me,
this is actually a huge thing that Yale does.
And Harvard. And a bunch of places.
Although Yale does it more generously, I think.
Yeah,
than
Yale
Harvard
doesn't base
does.
it on what job you go into. So you can become a concert pianist, and they will still pay your loans back. But yeah, so I don't know. So in many ways, that being free of this, I have to pay back my law school debt, which is also crushing, and which is why most people go to law firms because they pay a lot of money, and you can start paying down those loans. There are very few jobs out of law school, especially with the debt burden that students have now, that are going to pay you the kind of salary that's going to even allow you to make your monthly payment.
Yes.
And so for me, the very fact that existed, and I will always be grateful to Yale Law School for this, really helped me think outside the box and imagine all kinds of things that I don't know that I would have if I had to really be concerned only about how do I pay back my loans. And so that was the impetus. And I applied to the FBI in my third year of law school. This was 1999. The FBI was on a hiring freeze at the time.
Yeah, that lasted exactly 22 months longer than you
exactly. But I did I connected with people through AUSAs that I knew, two FBI agents, and basically they were like, look, you might be waiting 3, 4, 5 years to get into the bureau. And some of them had waited that long. They had applied and gone through various phases. And then, so they were like, you have to just, keep going on with your life, and then maybe you'll get the call. And that's what I did. I applied for the clerkships, and I went to Puerto Rico. When I was in Puerto Rico, I had a language test. And so I was in the FBI system as a foreign language speaker. So I am a Spanish speaker, and I also speak an Indian language called Kannada.
Oh.
And there was literally no one in the intelligence community to test me in Kannada, so they just took my word for it and just thought of this in their system. And this becomes important later because
is that unique to a region or a specific community?
It is spoken primarily in the state of Karnataka in India, which is approximately 70 million people.
So it's a small community.
It's like Rhode Island. So
it's like Rhode Island for India.
Right. So it's a major language. Bangalore, which is the capital of Karnataka, which is sort of the Silicon Valley of India. That's,
and it's a separate language or a dialect?
it is a language.
Okay.
So
there are 400 languages.
Yeah, there's
in
16
India.
different languages in India, and then like hundreds of dialects off of them. If you actually get an Indian rupee, it will say the currency in like whatever, 15 different scripts. And of course, because of British colonization, everyone who has an education does speak English, so you can get around speaking English. But in any case, so I'm in their system as a language speaker, and this becomes important because at the end of my clerkship, I started my clerkship in October of 2000. Right at the end of my clerkship, 9/11 happens, and I get a call from FBI headquarters, and they say, "Are you still interested in the FBI?" Because they were at that point, not only had the hiring freeze been lifted, but they were prioritizing foreign language speakers. If you'll remember, the inability of them to have kept up on all kinds of things that required foreign language skills was one of the factors, like kind of leading up to 9/11. So, being the reactive agency that it is, they were like, "Hey, maybe we need people who speak foreign languages," and that's kind of how I got expedited through.
All right, so now we're through phase one, how you get into the FBI from the track.
Mm-hmm.
But then you do this other interesting shift, which is you spend 3 years in the Bureau, and then you don't go from there to a U.S. Attorney's Office, which, by the way, would have been a totally clever move. I cannot tell you. I don't need to tell you because you get asked the same question, I'm sure, like 50 times a year. How do I get from law school to a U.S. Attorney's Office? And that's a question that I find myself answering like dozens of times a year. But you do something else. Having planned to do that, you become an admissions officer at Yale Law School. So my first question is, how many we asked like how many Yale Law students were at the, end up going to the Bureau, but how many Yale admissions officers, came from the Bureau?
Yeah, so...
Is it safe to say none?
None.
Yeah. How did that happen?
So that happened...
Because the Bureau opens all kinds of opportunities for people. Some go into, private security. Some go into private investigations. Some just are lifers at the Bureau. But admissions at elite law schools is just not one of the traditional doors it opens. So how did that happen?
So, well, what happened was, when I was in Quantico, I met the person who I ended up marrying. I struggled at Quantico, especially with the physical fitness or physical, training stuff, particularly push-ups. I was terrible at push-ups. And one of the other people in my class helped me with push-ups. We fell in love, got married. And so, so then
did that make you better at push-ups eventually, or worse at push-ups because you just gave up because you'd fallen in love and you were like, I don't have to know how to do push-ups anymore? Or were you like, now I found my life partner? Oh,
I became really good at push-ups, and then I could do 2 pull-ups. No, because he went to the Air Force Academy. So, for him, the FBI Academy was kind of like a joke, right? And for me, I had never been in this kind of environment before. I had never been tested along these criteria. So while I can take tests. So you were
I'm fine with the LSAT, but fucking push-ups is...
Okay, no. Let's stop here. I failed the PT test that was given on the first day, spectacularly, okay? So you can get, so there's 5 different events, and you can get negative points in them if you don't even meet a minimum threshold. I ended up with a 0. Now, I was coming...
I didn't mean to laugh. I just wasn't expecting a 0. I thought
I was a 0.
A 2.
So, okay, I will say in my defense, I had been in a pretty serious car accident 4 weeks before, where I had injured my ribs. But, so it was hard to do stuff, but nevertheless, I still wouldn't have been able to do the push-ups, which was my demise. or just the other upper body stuff. It was terrible, and it was humiliating, and I'd never failed anything in my life. And of course, they're really mean to you there too, because they're trying to wash you out. So they're like, maybe you don't belong here. Maybe you should go back to school and do what you're good at, And so I'm
like, okay.
I know, so maybe I should. And of course, like the thing, and to go back to your other point, Ben, it's not like I had a lot of support, right? Like everybody from law school thought I was freaking crazy. My professors thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was nuts. Like they were so angry. They're like, why did you go to these schools to become a police officer? And they're like,
you're trying to explain it's not the police.
It's not the police.
It's really like the Yale Law School of police.
Exactly.
But they're totally not buying it.
Well, because they're immigrant parents, so they are like, and they had seen some of these offer letters coming from these law firms, so they were just like, what is happening? Why are you doing this? So I was a complete failure for them. Everybody thinks I'm crazy, so I'm all alone. And so I really had to rally, in these first few days at Quantico and decide whether I was going to go through with it, because I didn't know if I could. Like, I was like, I don't know if I can pass this thing. I've never done anything like this before. And so it was in that I think the guy I ended up marrying, who, by the way, I'm not married to anymore. So that's another, in lieu of fun show or something.
The Asha's divorce edition. I think
tell us everything.
We're going to leave that one, to your own podcast.
But the point is, he felt bad, and so he, started helping me. I, in return, by the way, helped him with the legal training, because there was a lot of law stuff and Fourth Amendment stuff and things like that. So I tutored him on the law. He helped me with the push-ups. He tutored
you on push-ups. Yeah.
He tutored me on push-ups.
This is the stuff about which marriages are made.
Exactly. So
until they're not anymore.
Yeah.
But basically, as a result of marrying him, we were a 2-agent couple, which is not, it's kind of a Mr. and Mrs. Smith scenario. This very stressful. We lived in Jersey City. We commuted an hour to work, because you in the FBI, or at least in New York, you're required to drive your bureau car to work. So you can't just take the subway or things like that, because you have to be able to respond if necessary. And especially after 9/11, they were really concerned about responsiveness. And then we were both working in the counterintelligence division, and we had these crazy schedules because you would meet sources at night, and you had to do surveillances and do all of this stuff that, it's not a 9-to-5 thing. So, we got to a point where if we wanted to start a family, this was not going to be a viable lifestyle, that we were going to be able to continue. And it just so happened that at that time, the Yale Law School's new dean, Harold Coe, had put out a search for a new dean of admissions. And so, a few people from the law school reached out to me, and I thought, I didn't know that these jobs ever came open. I always imagined deans of admissions as these old guys,
they're crusty old people who've always had that job.
Who've just always had it. And so I was like, okay. So, I applied for it, and it turns out that at Yale Law School, most of the senior dean positions have traditionally been alumni of the school. And particularly the dean of admissions. They've always hired a former alum of the school to be the dean of admissions, because Yale kind of has this mystique and special sauce that they want. And Harold Coe had been my civil procedure professor and loved me. So it kind of worked out. And for me, it was, I feel like looking back, I wouldn't have left the FBI for many jobs. I wasn't looking to leave, but if I were going to leave for a job, becoming the dean of admissions at Yale Law School seemed like a pretty cool gig. And also, offered me a certain stability and lifestyle that could be conducive to the next phase of my life. So that's how that transition happened. And as it turns out, there were actually a fair amount of transferable skills from the FBI to being the dean of admissions. So,
all right. So in the Bureau, for those of you who don't know this, there is like every organization has a distinction between the people the organization is about and everyone else. And in the FBI, the question that people ask to distinguish, is this organization about you or are you one of the everyone else, is he gun carrying or is she gun carrying, right? It's the distinction between a gun carrying agent and everyone else. I venture to say at the Yale Law School, gun carrying is not the distinction that separates you from everyone else. So other than being what are the skill set between being a gun carrying FBI agent and a gun carrying Yale Law School dean, that is, what are the things it has in common?
Well, I think in the end, when you're reading, so I was reading approximately 3,000 to 4,000 applications a year for law school. By the time I left the law school, I'd read about 40,000 applications. So, you're really doing, when you're looking at that many people and for so few slots, especially at Yale, because it has a very high yield, and so you're selecting approximately 230 people out of that group. You're basically doing behavioral assessment, right? Like you're looking and you're reading what they're saying, but you're also reading between the lines, and trying to get a sense of what makes this person tick. And so, and it's harder actually as a dean of admissions because you're doing this completely on paper. You're doing it in, based on this package of what they want you to see. And so you're also relying on things like recommendations and trying to, get a sense of the person. So, there's a lot of trying to suss out, who the genuine, authentic people are, what they're going to contribute, those kinds of things that I think fed over. And also, I ended up doing a lot with, for example, the character and fitness questions, which, you get a lot of crazy stuff in there and people who end up lying, and then you have to bust them. And,
Wait. What do you mean the character and fitness questions? Like, what end up lying?
Like, have you ever been arrested? Like, you're supposed to be.
Oh, you mean like people lie?
Yeah.
And say that they haven't been arrested, and then
or they like really like downplay what they did, or they'll leave out something.
Man, I would have been like, that's so crazy. I never assumed that like they looked into any of those things.
Or alternatively, somebody would apply with a pretty serious record and then comes with this amazing, rehabilitation story. And, and so, then you interview them and you're like, I need to understand like who you are now and how this situation changed you and what you've learned from it. So there's both ends of that, which I think tapped into a little bit of the FBI stuff as well.
Cool.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Kate,
I mean, I just am I love in your life, it seems like you've pursued what kind of will make you happy and what it is that you kind of want to do. Like knowing that you're not going to be able to work for a law firm is actually a really kind of hard thing to know, especially when you're coming from a top law school and all of your friends are more or less marching off to work in big law and like to do law firms. So like, what do you think is next for you? Like, what do you think is kind of going to be like the next big thing? Do you think you're going to keep teaching? Is that something that's really been something that you've liked just as much as, I imagine it's really fun to like kind of like get to know students on paper and interview, and to admit them to the law school where you went to school, but
yeah.
Like, totally different feeling teaching.
Yeah. No, it's great because then, especially for the length of time I did it, many of them have gone on to do amazing things. It's really funny that you end up seeing like some of them on Mueller's team and then the others, doing crazy things in the Trump administration.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Wow, I totally, admitted both of these people. I don't know. I always have like kind of a very I know people who are very goal-oriented. And I think I'm a goal-oriented person, but they all get like their 3-year plan and their 5-year plan and 10-year plan. And the lesson that I've taken, and this is what I say when I do talks to younger people, is you simply can't predict what's going to come up in your life. And so I am always checking in to say, do I love what I'm doing now? And am I happy with it? And am I open to new things that may be coming up on my radar? So I think you have to have your antenna up. And I think that two things have really accounted for my career path. Number one, I'm just not that motivated by money. I mean, I think that's part of why walking away from the law firms was not as hard for me, because I wasn't as lured in by, the lifestyle, and I'm going to have this, great, whatever in New York City, and I think that's very attractive to a lot of people. They want that. I never wanted that. And that wasn't kind of what was drawing me. And then the other thing is that I am willing to take risks. That's what I've realized, that a lot of people are they're very afraid. And I don't know if it's a fear of failure or just a fear of kind of going off on a not very well trodden path or what. I especially see it with younger people now who are terrified of taking risks and who want to, have every contingency plan in place and know everything that's going to happen. And I sometimes say you just have to take a leap of faith and understand that if it doesn't work out, you'll be resilient and you'll get it together, like I did at Quantico. you get it together, and then you'll figure it out. So what's next? I don't know. I'm really happy where I am. I do love teaching, and I want to keep doing that. And I'll just see what comes up, and if it's something that I that really feeds my soul, in terms of offering me something that will help me develop personally or contribute something new.
Yeah, I love that. I feel very similar. I like a lot of what you said. I don't know that I've ever heard anyone besides myself, like when I'm giving advice to people, I'm like, I'm just not, it depends on what you're motivated by. Like, I am also not motivated by money, and that has never made a ton of sense to me. But it's amazing. It's amazing just like, I don't think that anyone is like, does a lot of spending time trying to help younger people figure out what it is that makes them happy, or like what it is that motivates them, and then that like being a guiding force. Like, if you do really value stability and you like constraints and you're not, maybe and you like having money, like a lot of money, maybe like maybe a law firm is a great job for you.
And
right?
there are people who thrive.
Tons of people, and they're not boring people or uninteresting people. They're just like, that's just like the environment that they work best in. And it sounds, I just very much understand exactly what you're talking about.
I also think, and I think we're all from the same generation. I do have to say, I feel
Kate's
fortunate.
younger.
Is she younger?
Yeah.
Are you a millennial, Kate?
You graduated from law school when I was in 9th grade.
Okay.
So
yeah, Kate's a lot younger. You and I are right around the same age.
Yeah, you and I. So I feel like as a child of the 80s and 90s, in many ways my worldview is sort of an abundance philosophy. Like,
Say more. What do you mean by an abundance philosophy?
I know exactly what you mean.
Abundance philosophy is believing that they're like kind of just at a very subconscious level, believing that there is enough to go around for everyone, that life is
people like us do just fine,
that that life is not zero sum, that if something bad happens, there'll be something there to kind of help you out, or
I don't know that that's like a generational thing.
Well, I have noticed in talking to people that
I certainly feel that way, and I'm a lot younger than you guys.
Both the 2008 crash was really, I think, significant for young people. And so the opposite of the abundance philosophy is a scarcity mentality, and just kind of like, I need to get ahead and grab this thing, because if I don't, there's not enough, and somebody will get ahead of me and grab it. And that sense, I think, I see more with younger people, and I just felt like with the people I graduated from law school from, we were just kind of, yes, I did the FBI, and that was weird, but my class included, for example, Matthew Pearl, who ended up like becoming a novelist, and Yul Kwan, who ended up like winning Survivor and going and doing stuff on the Discovery Channel, and another friend of mine, David Orr, who was a poetry critic for the New York Times. Like, people just did stuff, and there was just kind of and I feel like it's a generational thing as much as, also maybe a Yale Law School thing of having that safety net in terms of loans and things. But I feel like students now are much more afraid of kind of they don't sense that there is something there that's going to catch them, is my sense. Ben, do you feel that way too?
So I agree there is a huge difference generationally between, so I am 51, you're a few years younger than I am. And I think people of our generational cohort were not boomers, and there's a real cultural difference between us and boomers. But we did operate with boomer-like assumptions at the beginning of our career, that things were just okay. And there's a whole cohort of us for whom that what turned out not to be true. And what happened to them really conditioned what happened to a bunch of Gen Xers combined with the crash really conditioned, I think, life for a lot of millennials, that they have this knowledge both from having seen people and from their own experience of coming out of college and there just not being a lot of opportunities, that like life is different now. And but I came out of school confident that I could just freelance write and like make my way, and I would not go to graduate school, and things would be fine. And that was true.
Thing. Things will be fine.
And that was true.
How I always thought of things.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. So I graduated from college in 2006, and I got into Michigan Law School. And I didn't go. I deferred for 3 years because I wanted to go and see if I could make my living writing in New York. And I lived in like a crappy apartment, and I made like $25,000 a year, and I ate stuff, whatever it was. And then there was the crash, and I went back to law school, not to Michigan, ultimately. But there was one of the things that I always taken away from that period was that the lore around law school, when I was graduating and first applied in 2006, was like I was watching kids come out of Brown, where I'd gone undergrad, and they were going to law school for 3 years. They would go to good law schools. They would go for 3 years, and they'd be making, and then they would tell me that they were making $180,000 a year. And to me, that was just this impossibly high amount of money. That was more money than like my parents made. That was like all of this stuff. And that like, and then they also made it sound, they're like, and you work this summer and they pay you $20,000 for it, and they give you like lobster dinners every night, and there's like, it's barely working, it's like your summer associateship, it's like you have to get hired because it's crazy if you don't get hired.
I have a super great joke about that, by the way.
And like that world, like that myth, that picture of big firm lifestyle, even though I even knew at the time that like after you got there they worked you to death and things like that, that mythology around big law had completely disappeared by the time I went to law school in 2009. Like there was that there was like the worst year. And like I think I've waited, and by like I think at first I was like, well, that lifestyle will come back. I'll just, maybe that'll be like a myth that it never has come back. It's never come back. And like to your scarcity point, that like, oh my God, people were like scraping each other's, like, it wasn't like tear books out of the library type of competitive type of thing, or like pages out of the books in the library type of thing. But there were no public interest jobs. There were no jobs in government because of hiring freezes. And there was almost no hiring in big law. Or the classes were severely reduced. And if you missed, as you say, like these tracks, if you missed the track, if you were in that lost class or whatever, you were just screwed. Like it was you
were just shit out of luck. Those classes in 2008, 2009, 2010, when the legal market shrank, And there were, Harvard law grads that were unemployed,
I had friends who graduated in 2012 with me. It took out of Georgetown. It took them 3 years to get jobs, and they were in the top half of the class and everything else. There just was they didn't get into a summer associateship, and they didn't get so they were an RA or something, and then they just didn't get into the thing. And even though they were totally great candidates, they were out of the loopy. And so you just kind of so I don't know, but you are right. Maybe that is the dividing line. It's 2008, 2009, because it changed the market so much for some of these upwardly mobile jobs of going to law school and then getting a big firm job, and those always being available.
And also, law school debt exploded in that time too.
Yeah.
So, when I graduated from law school, if you looked at kind of average debt, and I don't have these precise numbers, but, the average law school debt to starting firm salary ratio, might have been 0.5, 50 per, you might have 60,000 in debt and, start at 130,000, and then you go just another 7 years, and average debt has now doubled.
Yeah.
To,
totally.
$125,000, for some law school grads, close to $200,000. And starting firm salaries have gone up from 130 to 180, which is just not the same increase. And so, the reason that people had the high flying lifestyle is that if you're graduating with $60,000 in debt and then you take a $130,000 job, guess what? You actually still have money left over to go eat at the nice restaurants and order the bottle of champagne or live your high lifestyle. I don't even know that elite law school grads starting, going to the top white shoe firms have the same discretionary income after they start paying off their loans. So
it's not. Okay, so
all right, so we're seeing in the chat that Bill Barr has resigned. So I'm going to look into that while Mike Godwin asks his question and Asha does a little victory dance. Mike Godwin, the floor is yours.
Shit.
You
Hi,
guys
Mike.
talk Shakespeare. I'm going to see what I can find out about Bill Barr.
Mike, talk to us from Shakespeare.
Oh, well.
Oh, yeah, Mike, we have to tell them about Winedale, our connection.
Well, I've told them a little bit in the chat. So Asha and I, at different years, performed as students. We were not acting students, but we performed in Shakespeare at Winedale. Asha did it well, either when she just finished up at Yale Law School or so, in any case, I actually went to my fourth summer at Winedale while I was in law school. So I had that experience. But my question, so we can talk about a lot of things. Oh, but I want to show, this is my dog shirt for the day.
Ooh.
Can you see?
Whoa, wait.
This is the dog.
Oh, it's a dog shirt.
And a cat.
Yeah.
I'm wearing a Baby Cannon, Order of the Baby Cannon
And you
shirt.
think this is the Berkeley Dog and Cat Hospital sweatshirt?
That's pretty awesome.
It's pretty great.
All right. So, at any rate,
Jeffrey Rosen is going to be the acting attorney general.
Wait, Jeff Rosen of GW?
No.
Jeff
Rosen. Not Jeff Rosen of the National
Sorry.
Constitution Center, but Jeff Rosen, who is the deputy attorney general.
Oh, duh. Okay, sorry.
Who will be.
Sorry.
There's reason to hope that he will be very boring for 37 days. Sorry, you were saying.
Oh, yeah. So I was saying, well, look, let me just get my question out there because people want to probably ask Asha other questions. Oh, Matney says hello, by the way, Asha.
Who does?
Robert Matney.
Okay.
I don't know. He's another Shakespeare at Winedale.
Okay. That name sounds familiar, and I'm trying to.
He saw you perform Rosalind, too.
Yeah, I played Rosalind this summer. So while everybody else was taking the bar exam, I spent the summer acting Shakespeare. And then I took the bar the following summer after.
Rosalind has about as many lines as King Lear does. For those,
it was a lot. Yeah,
it was a lot.
It was a great part, though.
Oh, sure. No, it's an excellent part. So my question, which people handily voted at the top of the list, was what Shakespearean characters are most like people in the Trump administration, or what, and the first one I came to mind was Stephen Miller is kind of like Malvolio, except less funny. But Malvolio means ill will, right? So that's Stephen Miller all over. So that was my thought, but maybe you have some thoughts about which characters now. Maybe Bard is a character now. Anyway, which Shakespeare characters do you see that most align with characters in the Trump administration?
I've always compared people, so it's Shakespearean era, though not necessarily Shakespearean characters. I feel like we can learn a lot about Trump and the Trump administration from Henry VIII, where Trump is Henry VIII, and I would make Barr Thomas Cromwell. He's the one
He doesn't kill anybody yet.
Well, he's been executing people.
That's true. Actually, he had. Although he hasn't executed Melania. That's a good point. Actually, I take it back. He's been on a killing spree recently.
He's been on a killing spree.
Yeah,
but Barr
good point.
is, like Thomas Cromwell, like trying to legally orchestrate these things on behalf of the king in order to achieve the outcomes that the king wants, right? Like, Cromwell is trying to figure out how does he separate from Catherine of Aragon, and what kind of legal arguments can we make, and has the oath of succession that he's the loyalty oath that's in there to the king.
There are certain Shakespearean characters though that have like really direct relation to people around Trump.
Okay,
for example, Polonius.
Who's Polonius? I mean, I know Polonius from Hamlet, but who's the analog?
Polonius?
Well, so any of several pompous senators who, when you get on television and you say, dude, is this okay what the president is doing? They give you this long rant of platitudinous garbage that doesn't answer the question because they're essentially courtiers of and in Polonius's case it's because he's kind of a moron, but he's a moron who's essentially a servant of power. There's a lot of Rosencrantz and Guildensterns. There's a lot of I think there's like think about all the people we expected more from in the conservative world, or at least people like me did, and they turned out to just do whatever the guy wanted.
Let's go through the great villains and figure out, like, who's Iago?
I was actually just looking those up. I was just thinking about who is Iago.
But there's no Iago in real life.
No, but like...
There are Richard III's in real life, but there are no Iagos in real life.
I don't know.
Iago is a demon.
I mean, yes, obviously, but like some of the actions of Iago, like the killing of like...
I mean, I suppose the closest thing to a Iago in real life is like Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I'm kind of thinking. Like, well, who is like, what about like, I don't know. I was trying to like think up like who Edmund was.
Steve Bannon to the people in the chat, Steve Bannon thinks he's Iago, but he's actually not that impressive. Like, he casts himself as Darth Vader. He's not Darth Vader. He's like, he's arrested on a Chinese magnate's yacht.
What about Lady Macbeth?
Obviously we have to.
Ivanka's too dumb to be Lady Macbeth.
Yes, I agree. But what about like, there's, I don't know. I feel like
I'm weighing that.
I'm just kind of like, I don't know. Like, you have to think about like, there's so much there in terms of like, especially the family connections in the administration that like, I feel like you can come up with some pretty good actually one-to-one like the mother of or the son of, or like, but I'm trying to think of that. Like, I was like, is Edmund kind of like Trump Jr.? Like, no, like, not really. I don't know. But this is fun.
But I do want to say that first of all, Tomas, I don't buy the McConnell is Iago thing. I think that gives McConnell a little too much credit. But I do think that the relevant actor is less Iago than Richard III, who is entirely driven by resentments. And Iago is like way more complicated in motivation and may just be pure evil, and kind of makes up resentments to justify being evil. But Richard III is actually
is also racist, so that's a good fit for the.
It's true, although everybody is, it's not. I don't know. I got to think about that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Genevieve, you've been sitting here patiently while we've been trying to map
Hello.
Shakespeare onto the administration, and you've been like,
No. I'm just contemplating it, and some of them are a little scary how they fit. But my question is not Shakespeare related and slightly less fun. But like, setting aside prosecution, are there any proactive measures that can be taken to mitigate the counterintelligence risks that President Trump will pose after he leaves office?
Gagging.
Yeah. Wait, Genevieve, do you mean just like the security levels that he has, like the information that he has? Like, what are you talking about him specifically, or like people that worked, like the whole administration?
I'm speaking about him specifically, and I feel like a lot of his disclosures have been covered to date, and so as that changes and his position changes, they won't be covered. And prior to that, how do you kind of control?
Super interesting. Okay,
yeah,
so Asha, imagine that you are now some hybrid combination of Chris Wray, for whom I know you have deep affection in your heart, and our incoming DNI, Avril Haines. And you are collectively, in these two capacities, responsible for mitigating the counterintelligence risk that civilian former President Donald Trump poses, and you are not the Attorney General, and you do not have the ability to indict him. So what do you do?
I mean, look, he's leaving office knowing a lot of secrets. I think we're fortunate that he didn't read or pay attention to his PDB most of the time. So maybe, but he's going to have enough that will be valuable. I don't know what you can do beyond continuing to monitor him. Right. And I think this, creates a really interesting question. Definitely there are structural problems for a counterintelligence investigation against a sitting president. But I'm assuming that he will be the first former president who is a clear and significant counterintelligence risk. And the FBI would basically be faced with, do we continue to monitor this former president? I think yes. I think there has to be a counterintelligence, some level of investigation on him after he leaves office. It's, especially because if you're looking at it from an intelligence perspective, not only does he have the knowledge of valuable information, but, speaking of resentments, he also has the motivations to give them up. He's greedy. He, has a huge ego. He's going to be incredibly resentful for having been let down. He does not have any loyalty to the United States. So he is like the most exploitable person that from
It's such a
an
great
intelligence perspective. You know what I mean? It's not like he's like the stand-up guy who, just loved his time in office and is going to leave happily.
Well, one of the things that I've always found really interesting about FBI like surveillance or like clearance checks is that like it's really not about necessarily having done X thing at some point, but you're like being caught in a lie, or you're like that you either lie about it or that people will find out about it and you're not open about it. So like this is like a great example of like, these are his motivations. His motivations would not be that he's caught in a lie. His motivations would be just that he's like completely self-serving and would be willing to do whatever he needs to do to like preserve his brand or promote his brand.
He's also $421 million in debt.
Yeah.
So
I really think that people do not.
Yeah.
That's like under talked about for some reason. I don't get why people aren't talking about that.
No, everything.
He's
just
so broke.
off. Yeah, he's so broke. But to Genevieve's question on what you could do beforehand, also because I think it's related. I think it's a great question because, I mean, Ben, I think you'd agree. I don't know if you agree with me. I mean, my thought is you can't require a background check as a condition for running for president, because
no,
that would be unconstitutional. I mean, presumably the parties, the national committee, before they allow someone to run on their ticket could require that, but I don't think you could as a law require it. And it's interesting because, and I've said this before, people who follow me on Twitter might have heard this, you learn how to do background checks at the FBI, and there's a mnemonic that you use when you do your background check, and it's Carla F. Bad. And it's to help you remember all the areas of somebody's life that you need to ask questions about to see if there's any red flags. And that's character. So character, associates, reputation, loyalty, ability, finances, bias, alcohol, and drugs. And you imagine that everybody from the lowest level secret security clearance up to whatever TSSCI and all the different letter name clearances goes through that check, but the president does not.
Right.
And if you were to go through Carla F. Bad, basically Trump would have serious, wailing sirens in every single category except maybe alcohol.
Could I?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say, like, I want to just point out something here, which is that it's not just Trump who doesn't go through that. Everyone who's elected in the United States of America doesn't go through that. Yeah. That is a weird part of like how there is no, in a representative system, there is no floor of there is no floor of qualifications. Like literally anyone can be elected to anything. And so, and that's not true of appointments, and that's not true of hiring generally, especially into some of these agencies, as you know so well. So like, I think that's a weird kind of part of how like we do business anyways, is that like there's so much clearance given to people who are elected without them doing Carla F. Bad. I love that. I never knew that acronym for it. Now I'm not going to forget it.
Christopher, you get the last question tonight.
All right. Hi, Asha. As a Shakespeare major in college, the same department as that Epstein character, I would say that that Lady Macbeth is Rebecca Mercer. Okay. I
do want to say that Rebecca Mercer, like Lady Macbeth, incites murders in a very immediate, direct way. Rebecca Mercer has many faults, but I do want to say I've never known her, not that I know her at all, but we don't know that she's said, hey, I would rip the baby from my breast and dash its brains on the floor if I had promised as you have done, which is a reasonable paraphrase of one of Lady Macbeth's lines. Just saying.
Oh, but then maybe like Ghislaine Maxwell or somebody from the OxyContin family. Anyway, shifting from the greatest writer in English to the greatest American writer, Faulkner wrote that the past is not dead; it's not even past. So I wanted to ask, why do you think that Mueller investigation did not go into Trump's finances? And if you were FBI or director or Attorney General, would you open an investigation into money laundering, tax fraud, and other things that, or would you just leave that to the states and New York City?
Wow, what a question to end on. I mean, I think that's going to be the fundamental dilemma of the Justice Department for the Biden administration, right? And I think will also depend on the nature of any pardons that Trump tries to give himself or gets Pence to give him if he resigns. Do you think he's going to resign? I think he will resign with like 24 hours to go and get Pence. Like, that would be the smart move. If I were his lawyer,
yeah,
I'd
but
be like,
you're assuming a
like
level. It assumes a level of strategy and tactic that he doesn't actually show. He's completely emotional, and he's gonna go out whining, and I don't even think he will pardon himself.
But don't you think he could frame it as "I quit"? Because he can't stand for something to be ended for him. But this way, he gets to end on his own terms and say, you know what, F this job. I don't want it. Even though there's like 1 day left.
I just got a text from,
From Bill Barr? He wants to
not
work
from
for
Bill
lawfare?
Barr, but from like a colleague at the Bureau of yours, who, in answer to the question which Shakespeare characters map onto which, writes Nunez / Cash Patel / Meadows / Ratcliffe, Dogberries all. Dost thou not suspect my place? Dost thou not suspect my years? Oh, that he were here to write me down an ass. But masters, remember that I am an ass, though it be not written down. Yet forget not that I am an ass.
Nunez is definitely bottom.
There you go.
I love that. So can we have to do a poll? But what is and for
what's
the
poll today?
I think that the poll needs to be: will Bill Barr write a tell-all book about his time in the DOJ? What do you think, Asha?
No.
Wait, you're going to bias the poll.
Okay, sorry. I can't bias the poll. I actually wonder.
All right, the poll is up.
You mean as a way to save his as a way to rewrite his legacy,
anything,
and save his reputation?
Think of all of the people who have like left and then written tell-all books, and like been taken in by the left because they've like divulged
It's
all
not
of their.
Barr's style.
I don't think it's Barr's style.
I know.
I mean,
no one's gonna,
he just wrote a sycophantic letter of resignation.
I didn't look at the letter of
I haven't
resignation.
read the
It's
letter
pretty
yet.
unctuous.
Is it?
Yeah, I think like the viewership is overwhelmingly going no on the tell-all book.
That's interesting. Well, they're probably right. Like, I don't know. Like, he probably won't, but, you know, if he does, then I'll get to, you know, have been there first.
All right. Asha Rangappa, come back. We have to do a whole episode on your divorce.
Yeah.
Because you offered. And tomorrow we have Pete Strzok coming back to the show to talk about the legacy of John le Carré, as well as the history of counterintelligence in literature. So join us for that. That'll be 22 hours and 55 minutes from now. And until then, Kate?
Well, we don't have fun anymore, but for right now, we don't have Bill Barr as our Attorney General either. So,
so there's that. We will see you. I love how, like, physically excited you get about this, Asha. You're like...
Yeah, it's like, I know, we're all kind of having, like, a little... It's just a very fun... Well... I mean, this is what happens, by the way, Asha, when you do a show at 5 o'clock. Like, people dump their news right at 5 or right after 5.
I know, it's a great idea. Yeah.
I know. So we get to break news all the time.
Yeah.
So come back
Call me
anytime.
Would love it.
We'll and we will see you guys